Hi, this is Beth Jamison with HomeLife Academy, and I have Crystal Allen here with me, and we're going to be talking about ACT accommodations today. Crystal, what are some things that you have seen people get approved for ACT accommodations in the past?
The best part about that is there is a wide variety. There are so many things that students need accommodations for. I think people usually tend to think about more time and more maybe a quieter setting and things, but there are some situations that are even medical that need accommodations. People need to be able to bring supplies, extra supplies that other students would be allowed to bring. So I've seen quite a few of those get approved. How about you, Beth?
Yeah, extra time is a big one, especially students with dyslexia will get often a human reader or pre-recorded audio. Often that's helpful for them. Some students need testing over multiple days because, when you get that extra time, sometimes, that makes that 4-hour test like a 6-hour test or an 8-hour test, depending on how much extra time you get. And so some students are approved for multiple days. And if you are approved for multiple days, you will need to get a special test proctor to do the testing with you individually. What are some diagnoses that you have seen that have gotten accommodations with ACT?
So, like I mentioned, there are quite a few medical diagnoses that get them very consistently. Any sort of traumatic brain injury, type 1 diabetes almost always needs them. If you have visual impairments or hearing impairments, things like that are almost always going to get approved, especially if you have good documentation. But then there are a lot of the disorders that come along with that too. Things like autism, Asperger's, developmental disorders, psychiatric disorders, anxiety, sometimes ADHD. Those are sometimes a little more complicated, but those are the ones that I probably helped with during the time that I was working on it. Have you seen others since then?
Yeah, so I've had several, like you mentioned, visual impairments and hearing impairments lately, and then different medical diagnoses as well. But ADHD, dyslexia, autism, anxiety. Anxiety is kind of a harder one to get because, a lot of students have test anxiety. And so you have to prove that you don't just have test anxiety, that you have anxiety in all situations of life, that it affects your everyday life. Most diagnoses, you need an evaluation within the last 3 years. So like for dyslexia, ADHD, autism, you need to have a recent evaluation within the last 3 years. For some diagnoses, you need to have a diagnosis or an evaluation within the last year. So anxiety is one of those, visual impairments, medical conditions, traumatic brain injuries, those have to be within the last year because ACT wants to see, yes, you had vision problems, 3 years ago, but do you still have them? That kind of thing.
And I think some you can even be a little more recent, like if you've just recently been diagnosed with type 1 diabetes, or if you have just recently had some sort of traumatic brain injury. I know that you can get approved for those, and sometimes those might have come within the last few weeks before the test or something, and so there's you'd have to have enough time to at least submit it, but otherwise they will allow it even close up. But it does depend on the diagnosis. They want to see length of time, this concern over many years in some situations, but don't feel discouraged if something has just recently happened. Don't feel like you can't try for the accommodations. It doesn't hurt to try anything. So can you tell us a little bit more about some of the criteria that ACT considers when they're looking at the diagnosis that you're going to submit for an accommodations for?
So it kind of depends on the diagnosis, but they want it to be from a medical professional. They want to know when the diagnosis started. They want to know treatment history, how it affects your daily life, those kind of things. Usually it is a long document. It's not a one paragraph. It's usually 4 to 15 pages. Usually has like some test results, charts and graphs. Those are things that usually are in there. Depending on the diagnosis. I have seen though recently that ACT wants to see more than just an evaluation from the eye doctor. They want to see how does this eye diagnosis affect your reading capabilities. So it seems like on some things they're asking for more information than they used to. But we try and keep up to date on what they're looking for and pass that along to you. People don't think that they're going to need accommodations, but even things like if you need wheelchair access, sometimes that is something that needs to be approved in advance by ACT. or like if you
Right.
have a medical condition that requires you to have snacks or water or medication, that's something that does need to be approved beforehand.
And I think you're right. I think people forget, especially like in my own world, my own child has type 1 diabetes. So I talk about that a lot. We're just used to dealing with this every day. But then if you show up and you don't have some sort of accommodation in place, they can refuse to let you test that day. So it's always better to check in and see if you need an accommodation than it is to show up and find out that you're not going to be allowed to test because of whatever needs that they might not be able to provide for. I know we've talked a little bit about the reports and things. Is there anything extra they have to do if they're going to request an accommodation?
Yes. So there will be 3 forms that you will need to fill out. I'll send you those. You can fill them out and send them back to me. And we're happy to help you, with questions about how to answer them and that kind of thing. But there's consent to release information to ACT that just gives us permission to communicate with ACT your information. And then there's a teacher survey you as the parent teacher can fill out. If your student has like a tutor or another teacher in a co-op setting, they can fill one out as well. You don't have to have more than one. One is fine, but sometimes it's nice to have, extra ammunition to send in as well. And then there's an exception statement. And the exception statement is really important because it kind of takes the place of an IEP or a 504 plan. That, most students that are taking the ACT would have something like that. And so that exception statement, you're going to list everything that you do with your student at home that is an accommodation. And I think sometimes we don't think of things as an accommodation. We just automatically give extra time. We read something to them if they don't understand it, whatever, all these things that we do, we don't think of as accommodations. But any accommodations that you give at home, go ahead and put on that exception statement. Even if it's not something that you're asking for, sometimes it's helpful for ACT to see, hey, they do these 5 things at home, but they're only asking for these 2 accommodations with ACT. And then on that exception statement, it's going to ask for setting, which I think is one that stumps a lot of people. So what ACT is looking for is, do you allow that accommodation for classwork or tests or both? And so usually we allow accommodations on everything. So if you give your student extra time for classwork and tests, put classwork and tests in there.
It does get a little confusing since our home is our classroom. I always used to tell people that, an IEP is technically an individualized education plan. And when you're homeschooling, everyone has one of those. We're all doing it individually with each kid. And so just don't feel nervous to explain the things that you're doing, because that shows ACT that,
right,
this student does need extra support. And I think sometimes there's a stigma that feels like, well, I don't want people to know that I'm helping them that much, but I don't think that that's the case. If the student really needs the support, then we want them to be able to get that on these tests as well. We'd rather do more than less. So Beth, how about other tests? We talked a lot about ACT because here in the South, it seems to be the king, but I know there's all kinds of other tests, the CLT, the SAT, some of those. Can we try to get accommodations for those?
Yes. So for the CLT, that one is usually pretty easy to get accommodations for. There's a process that you go through for that one, but it doesn't need us as your school counselor to help you with that one. Let's say that. So you as a parent can file the accommodation request for the CLT. You just go to their website. I believe you upload an evaluation, and then there's a form that you fill out right there on their website, and that's it. And then SAT, we do a lot of SAT, not as many SAT requests as we do ACT, but we do help you with the SAT requests as well. Their process is a little simpler. You just fill out a consent form and a teacher survey. There's no exception statement, and turn in that evaluation from your doctor. So it's there's less paperwork to do for SAT. So I know there have been some situations where like a request is approved with SAT, but not with ACT. But I've also seen some situations where it's approved with ACT and not SAT. Have you seen anything like that, Crystal?
Yeah, I ran into that as well. Sometimes SAT was easier to work with. And sometimes the ACT was. It just depended on the situation. Sometimes I think that exception statement made a really big difference for ACT deciding, yeah, I think this does need accommodations. And since that's missing from SAT, it helps. But I've had the opposite be true, where SAT came and said, yeah, you need accommodations for this, but ACT didn't agree. So, it might be a situation where if you can find a testing site for SAT, if ACT won't allow an accommodation, you can always try for an SAT. The only holdback that I have with either one is that the process is a lot longer with SAT. You have to plan in advance to request those accommodations, because they take a lot longer to decide. ACT is much quicker. When I was doing it more consistently, I think it was a 15-day turnaround, and usually they were faster than that. And then for SAT, it could be up to 7 weeks, and sometimes they were giving you the notification even a little after 7 weeks. It's just a really big difference in the length of time.
That brings up the point that it's great to request accommodations ahead of time and start this whole process early. Because even like if you think your child's going to need accommodations, go ahead and contact us and let's talk through, what documentation you have and what you might need. Because if your documentation is not very solid, we might say, hey, you might want to get another evaluation. And sometimes that takes time. Sometimes you have to wait 6 months to get in, and then it takes them a few months to write up the report. So do start the process early. Don't wait until your child's going to take a test the next month and request accommodations.
Even things once you've gotten approved for ACT, that you run into situations where you sometimes might have to get a special test proctor, and that takes time. So it's always better to do it earlier, just to give yourself less stress, and it gives lots of time to make sure all your ducks are in a row so that your student doesn't feel the stress either, because it's already stressful to take these tests that have to prove all their knowledge in one morning. It's complicated, and so we want to make it as stress-free for all of you as possible. So the sooner that you do it, the better.
If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. My email is beth@HomeLifeAcademy.com, and would love to answer any questions that you have.
If they want to reach out to me, they're welcome to. My email address is Crystal, Crystal, @HomeLifeAcademy.com. But I am more of a support behind Beth. I'm usually the second in line if needed. So usually Beth's the right place to start.
I love a phone call. I think there's a lot to chat through. I want to know, what diagnosis does your student have? What accommodations do you think would be best for them? And I think that's best done through a conversation, chatting about what the options are, and then you can decide what would be best for your student. I'm also happy to go over the forms with you and how to fill them out. So yeah, a phone call is great, at least to get started, and then we can just kind of email back and forth questions. That works out really well.
I agree. I always thought it was a lot easier to just share the information so that if you had questions, you could get your answers immediately. And then once we've had initial discussions, then we can email. I agreed. I felt the same way as that.
Okay. Well, thank y'all for joining us today, and hope you have a great day.